Welcome to the Storycraft Cafe. Come in, grab a cup of your favorite beverage, and get ready to join the storytelling conversation. Storycraft Cafe is brought to you by Dabble, the ultimate cloud-based fiction writing software. Here we're going to bring together storytellers from all walks to encourage and empower you to craft your best story. Happy Tuesday. So glad you could join us today in the Storycraft Cafe. We have a fantastic interview, as always, for you with T.A. Willberg talking about historical crime and all of this good stuff. You're going to love this show. I sure had a great time talking with Tess. And be sure to join us over at storycraft.cafe, where you can be alerted to upcoming live interviews. We do them first over on YouTube, where you can join in on the conversation, pitch a question to our guest, offer some comments, and, join in the fun. Also, find your writing tribe over at storycraft.cafe. It's a social media platform just for writers. So if you ever are on Facebook or Twitter or something and you feel like, you can't say the things that you want to say because people will, think you're weird, or, the stuff that writers go through, you don't have to worry about that here. We are for writers by writers. You'll love it. Storycraft.cafe. Hang on. We'll join our conversation with T.A. Willberg in process. Be sure to join us for live interviews this week. Go over to storycraft.cafe and see what's coming up. Now on to our show. And we are live. Thanks for joining us today for another great author conversation. T.A. Willberg is here to talk about her brand new book, Marion Lane and the Raven's Revenge, the third book in the awesome Marion Lane series. I love this series. We chatted a couple of years ago when book one came out, and I've been so excited to talk with you again. Tess, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
So the new book came out a couple of days ago. I remember when we talked a couple of years ago when book one came out, and it was such a surreal experience, that how this character and that first book came along. Now that we have the third book in the series, how does it feel, and how is Marion kind of sitting with you these days?
Yes, what a journey. I mean, so that first book came out in 2020, the end of 2020.
Right.
But I had started writing in 2017, I think. And I always knew, I think I said this to you last time, that it was going to be a trilogy. So that was, I hadn't really plotted the trilogy out, but I kind of basically knew what was going to happen, and that it would be with Marion for 3 books, hopefully if 3 are published. Or at least I wanted to write 3. I didn't know if 3 would be published. And yeah, I feel now, I know all those characters so well. They feel real to me, like real people, and which is a crazy. I'm sure all authors can relate to that. That it just feels like they're friends, And Mary in particular, Bill, Frank, and it's just been. Actually, this is technically the last book. At least this is what we're saying for now. And so it was really sad writing the last chapter of this book. It was sort of a bereavement. But yeah, what an experience. I mean, it's literally changed my life. Before this, I was not a writer. Before Marion Lane, I was not a writer. I'd never tried to write anything other than like essays and whatever, creative essays. I'd never considered being a writer. I think we had this conversation as well last time. And I know it's such a weird thing because all the writers I hear talking about writing say they'd wanted to be a writer their whole life and dreamed of it. And for me, it had never been. I'm a chiropractor by trade. I studied 7 years for that. I have a master's degree in in spinal deformities. I mean, naturally I would become a writer. And yeah, I just one day I'd moved from South Africa, where I was born, to Malta, which is a tiny little country below Sicily. And we were living there. I was living there with my boyfriend, and I just literally one day when I had too much free time, I opened my laptop and I had this idea of a detective in a detective agency, and I was like, oh, I'd love to read a book like that, because I'd always been a big mystery reader.
Yeah.
And then I just like, oh well, instead of reading a book like that, maybe let me try just write it. That was literally the thought process, and I started writing, and as soon as I typed the first word, I was hooked on just being a writer and like writing this particular story. And as I say, changed my life. Now I'm a full-time writer. I've written these 3 books plus another one that will be coming out next year, and I'm halfway through my 5th book. So it's been quite an experience. Marion has changed my life.
Yeah, that is so wonderful. I remember us talking last time about your love of fantasy
Mm,
and also mysteries, and how they're such an interesting mix that on the surface you would think, well, what do mysteries with a little magical realism, what do they really have to do
yeah,
with each other? And then you get into the world of Marion, and it's a completely natural merging of these two genres that just works absolutely perfectly. As you've gotten into the series and really built out the characters in the world, does that still feel like a natural pairing to you?
it does to me, because those are my 2 favorite genres, and I was always just like, I can't believe like anyone would not agree. Like fantasy and mystery go so well together. And I feel like yeah, I mean, probably my favorite part of writing the Marion books was the gadgetry side of things. So if you've read the books before, anyone who's listening, there's this in this detective agency, this underground super secret detective agency in London, late 1950s. There's a particular part of the agency that makes special spy gadgets, and those gadgets are not quite. They are based in reality. So every gadget actually has like a real life gadget that I base it on, from sort of Cold War era, but they're also just a little bit magical. I've added, as you say, like magical realism, and yeah, that was the most fun. Like when I started writing the books and I was trying to come up with gadgets, I tried to make them all real, like as I said, like super scientific real things, and it just didn't feel right. I was like, there's something missing, and that's where the whole like magical realism side of the thing came in. And obviously the agency itself, which is underground and a little bit unrealistic in that sense, also has a little bit of magical realism. And so yeah, I love those 2, and I think they mesh so well together. I'm glad you agree.
The gadgets are one of my favorite things about these stories, and it's so fun that the series is set, 60, 70 years ago, because if it were set in modern times, there are so many mysteries that just wouldn't stand up if they were set in the modern era, because so many things happen where you could just pick up a cell phone or text
Exactly.
someone and story's over, that. But there's something really grand about setting things back before modern technology, but then also kind of playing with what would come to be. And that's what one of the things I love so much about these gadgets. So when you start thinking about a new book, or just thinking about the world, how do you come up with the gadgets? And do you start thinking of a certain problem that a particular gadget would mesh nicely with, or do you just dream up like this off the wall thing and then find out a way to use it in the world?
Yes, I think I'm trying to remember now. bear in mind that this book, this latest one, I wrote in 2021.
Right.
So, but
Yeah,
and the
the
others,
publishing world is
but I
timelines
do.
get weird.
I'm trying to remember like what exactly were. I think I did always. I was trying to think, okay, what would a group of detectives need to make their life easier? And then I would Google and do like a whole bunch of research on whether anything like what I thought up originally existed. And then from there, I would embellish the gadgets. So I'm trying to think of an example, like the tracking stone, the Vega compass in Marion Lane. So it's a little compass that's paired with a little, like almost like a chip that you can put on someone's shoe or whatever, and then you can track them. And that, I mean, that's not really too outlandish, because in KGB times there was something called a shoe transmitter, which
Right.
They would fit, and I'm sure all spy fanatics will know this. they fitted in the heel of a shoe, and it had like a little microphone, and so agents could hear what that target was saying and so on. So yeah, I would use real life stuff, and as I say, just add my own like magical elements for convenience, for plot reasons, but also for fun, because I'm like a super gadget freak. I love that stuff.
The world building had to be so much fun in this, the subterranean.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world, and that's one of the I can see that kind of taps your love of fantasy, was this kind of place where you get to do all this world building. What kind of things went through your mind when you started kind of working through where this was going to be set and how that would affect the stories?
Yes. Oh, it was so fun, and I spent so long kind of coming up with all the rules um, of the agency and how everything worked and all the departments, and there's so much that I obviously couldn't put in the books, otherwise it would have been really boring. But I decided on London, just kind of like automatically, really, because I love London, and I have been there a lot of time. My brother lives there, and I know they have a ton of underground like labyrinths, really, and like tunnels and all sorts of, from way back when. And also where I was living at the time when I wrote the book, Malta, is this little Mediterranean island, and they have an incredible underground world. Like it's unbelievable. It's from the 1300s, but it's been used. It was used in World War II as well, so it's been around for ages, and you can do tours under the underground and see. They've got this whole system. It's just incredible. I can't get into explaining it now. I'll be here forever. But that was a huge inspiration. And then, as I say, the real life London underground world. And then from there, it was just like, yeah, the departments, like what kind of departments would a detective agency need? Like who would work there? What are the kind of like secret passageways that maybe some of the employees don't even know about? That was all just fun, really. I could have written like a whole book just on the layout of the agency.
When we talked last, book one was out. We didn't get a chance to chat last year when book two came out, but now book three is out. You said that originally you really hoped that this would be a trilogy. When it's a brand new series with a brand new book from a brand new author, you never know exactly what next year might hold. So when you finished and published book one, as opposed to book two last year, did you have a different mindset when you were finishing those books? Like a lot of times, with the book one, you hope to spin that into a series, but maybe not. You never know how things are going to be received. So was there I guess what I'm asking is, was there a different um, uh, requirement in your mind to, have book one be able to completely stand alone if it had to, as opposed to maybe book two that you kind of know is going to be the middle part of a series? Um, were there different things in mind about how that book would end and how it would set up the final chapter in the trilogy? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, yeah. I always, I guess it's easy for me to say now, but I feel like I always would have, like, I had to write 3 books, even if no one was gonna publish them, because
Right.
it was just like the story was in my head and the characters were and once I started, not even finished writing the first book, I was like, well, I have to carry on. Like, somebody is gonna have to publish this book. Otherwise I'm gonna self-publish it, because yeah, I just had that story, that like eating me up from the inside. So I really had to write 3 books. And so actually, no, the feeling wasn't any different from the first to the second book. I did sell a 2-book deal in the beginning, so that was,
Okay.
and then the after the second book, while I was like writing the second book when I sold the third one under contract. So yeah, there wasn't really a period that I felt like it wouldn't be a trilogy, except right in the beginning when I wasn't even sure if the first one would get published. But I've always just been like, I didn't even let that get into my head. I was like, I'm writing 3 books and I'm going to either put them on Amazon or like something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my mindset.
I love it. You said that you're a full-time author now. Were you surprised when, kind of, life had brought you into this interesting circumstance where nothing had worked out the way you thought it was? I'll start writing a book, and now your path is, I would think, completely different than you thought it would be, in
Yeah.
2017, 2016, whenever all of that happened. Um, the world of happy accidents is an interesting one, isn't it?
It's incredible. I still think about it and I'm like, how am I a writer? This is so bizarre. Like, nobody, when I first told, so yeah, I think it was like 5 months of writing the first Marion Lane book before I even told anyone what I was doing. I don't know what they thought I was doing on my laptop, but I didn't tell anyone I was writing. And then only when I was actually looking for an agent did I tell like my parents and my close friends, and I was like, maybe one day I'll be an author. And they were like, what? What are you talking about? You're a character. This is ridiculous. And they're like, are you writing a book on like spinal deformity? I'm like, no, it's a detective detective fiction. Yeah, so like no one could have been more surprised than me. It was bizarre. And I'm still like, I'm a writer. That's crazy. But it feels like the most natural thing in the world when I think back to like my whole childhood, how much I love reading and how I'm very introverted, so I don't mind spending tons of time alone, and it's like suits my personality down to a T. But yet I'd never considered it as a career, which is just so strange, so strange. So it feels right, but it also feels just like it was like a godsend, really. It was,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy I'm a full-time writer now. I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
I love it. When you start thinking of a new mystery for each of these books in the series to kind of center around, what sorts of things do you think of, and how do you start thinking of kind of what the plot device is going to be for this particular book?
Yeah, I'm very much I'm not a plotter, which might surprise people because I write complicated plots. But I'll start out with I like to have the inciting incident in my head that just gets me going. So For example, with The Raven's Revenge, and The Deadly Rose, actually, the second book, the first chapter is not I'm Marion Lane. So, the I don't want to say too much. I always say too much, but anyway, the first chapters are the inciting incident, and they're a different character, and it's sort of a different setting. And often, if I can just sit down and write, like even the first paragraph of the first chapter of a book, that will get me going on the rest of the plot. And I often don't even know anything about the rest of the plot when I start. It's kind of a weird process. And then once I've started that first chapter, I'll start to plot a little bit, and kind of just, but nothing is based on a formula for me. It's all just instinct. I go on like, this feels right. This chapter needs to be more like a slow chapter. This one needs to be fast paced. This character needs to act in this way. Like I try not to be too, I try to just listen to my instincts, because it kind of has worked for me so far, and I'm scared to change up my way of doing things, because I might get, because honestly, I've never had writer's block, never, even for one day. I'll obviously have times when I am struggling with a certain plot issue,
Sure.
but it won't be that like I can't sit down and write anything. Like, I'll just skip ahead and write some, the next part of the story, but I won't know how those two dots connect or whatever. But I've never had, touch wood, writer's block, and I think that's because I don't get hung up on like rules and you can't do this and you can't do that, and you have to, like, this has to be the point where you plot point 2 or whatever. I just write, and it means that my editing process is a disaster for me, because then obviously I have to rewrite tons of stuff because it doesn't make sense. But as I say, it's kind of worked for me, so I'm going to stick to it.
Do you find that helps, that when you're kind of not sure what happens next, to just skip forward, start writing? Does it often reveal that, does the problem solve itself when you start writing and you start thinking, well, now I'm here, so this obviously had to happen there so that this could happen? Is it sort of like that
Yeah.
problems unravel themselves?
Always, I would say, like every time, because I think book 1, although it's a bit hazy for me now because it was a long time ago, but that one was difficult because obviously it was the first book I'd ever written, and I remember having a lot of plot issues there. But since then, yes, if I've got a problem, either I'll go for like a walk or something, that if it's not that big of a problem, I can just like go for a walk, or do something mundane like ironing, or like cleaning the bathroom or something. And that will, because I feel like if you're sitting there trying to figure something out, like trying, that's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
I don't know, for me anyway, then I'll be like completely blank. I'll have no idea what needs to happen. But if I can take my mind off it, either by doing something else, or as you say, by skipping ahead to the next scene that I know needs to come after that, almost, I would say 99% of the time, it'll just be like, oh yeah, it's so obvious. Because often it is. It's like such an easy, and you're overcomplicating it and making yourself crazy, but it's really such a simple answer. And you just need to step back.
Like you, I'm not a great plotter up front, and I like to kind of hold the story in my head and see where things might go sometimes. I have a friend, Josh Hayes, who is a meticulous plotter, and he told me one time, he said, everyone is a plotter. It just matters if you plot ahead of time or
Yeah.
during the editing process. And when you described your editing process a minute ago, it seems like that you're like me, that sometimes you end up with a bit of a jumbled mess, but all the pieces are there. Now I've just got to figure out how the puzzle fits together. Can you just kind of describe what your editing process is like?
That's so true. Yeah, what your friend said. Absolutely, because I do, when I think about it, like what I mean when I say I'm not a plotter, as you say, I don't plot before the book
Right.
I've started writing, because that's impossible for me. I cannot come up with anything. I'm like, I've got no ideas. Then as soon as I put myself in a scene, and in the head of a character, it all comes more naturally. But the editing process for me, I love editing. I actually think I like editing more than drafting, especially like the smaller line edit stuff. But yes, I will, if I'm editing on my own, so before my editor has looked at it, or my agent, I try and take the most important thing is to take a break from the manuscript. I'm sure you agree. You cannot go straight from writing a first draft into an
Right.
Yeah. So I'll take a break. I usually can't take longer than a week, but the longer the better, I think. And then I will not read it through. I never do that, because then I will stop halfway and start editing as I go. So I start from chapter 1 and I'll write down like what is happening in this chapter, what do I want to reveal, what is obvious to the reader. Like I'll literally make notes like that, and then I will get on to the next chapter. I'll do the same thing, and probably get so I don't go the whole way through. I'll go maybe 5 chapters in, and then look at my notes, and then start working on obvious things that have come up. It's very haphazard, and I would not suggest this method for anyone else. But as I said, it kind of works for me. So yeah, I'm making notes as I go, and particularly things that, as I say, like are obvious to the reader as I'm reading through. I'll be like, this character is obviously the bad guy, and I didn't want that to be so obvious, like stuff like that. I'll just write stupid notes to myself, and then yeah, so I'll go like piece by piece, maybe a third of the book edited, go down to the next third, blah, blah, blah. And then that will be the first editing phase. And then later on, when not such big changes need to happen, then I'll do like the whole book in one go. But also depends on the book. I've done different stuff for different books, like different editing strategies. I don't know. I'd be the worst writing coach.
You said earlier that you usually have the inciting incident in mind when you start. Do you ever have the resolution in mind when you start, or does that reveal itself as the story unfolds?
Yes, I do. I almost always have a resolution, but it always changes. So I will have like, I need to know like the basic theme of the story and basically what's happening, or just sort of what the story is about, and therefore you have to know the ending. But I don't think I've written a book yet that the ending has stayed. What I usually do is I'll think of a really basic story, like very basic, that would be incredibly boring, and I'll start writing it as that story. And as I go on, I'll add in subplots and twists, and then of course the ending will change, or a character will be one thing in one draft and then actually be the villain in the next draft. So that's kind of how it works. So I'm starting basic and then I add on layers, and I find that is easier for my brain to kind of get everything in order.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
I've had one story that I wrote where I had the last line of the story in mind from the very beginning, and then the whole thing was me writing toward that. And I have tried to duplicate that so many times, and I just can't. It was just it was a moment of magic where I just had that, and it was very clear where I was going. And never again. So,
And you stuck with it. Was that the line?
yes, that was
Wow.
absolutely the last line of the book, and it was amazing, and I loved it, and it was a magical experience, and never again.
That's genius. Yeah, I could never do that.
Yeah. So
I have had like opening lines that I think I've kept
yeah.
more or less, and opening even like opening like paragraphs, because I love a first chapter. That's always my favorite.
And I know, and it's so I don't want to say it's easy, because it's not easy, but it's so easy to write first chapters because they're so much fun. They're where all of the mystery and intrigue of a new character and a new world, come about, and there's so much excitement, and then you get past that and that kind of muddy middle, and nobody likes that.
Yeah, there's just like, oh, this is too hard.
Yeah. You said earlier that you have written a fourth book and now working on a fifth book. I am very sad to hear that the Marion Lane series is finished, at least for now, with a trilogy. Will you ever return to Marion?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm always tempted to, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to give it a break, and we'll see what happens. I love those characters though, so it's hard to say I'll never go back. Yeah.
So what else are you working on? Where do you go from Marion Lane? What are your next projects? Can you tell us anything about it?
I can tell you maybe a little bit. So yeah, I've of course changed completely, turned everything around as I usually do. So my next book is
Is it a
not
treatise on spinal health?
yeah, I think so. It's a contemporary. What can I say about it yet? I have sold it to a publisher. It'll probably be out next year, but I think I could say that it's a heist. It's a heist novel, so it's about a crazy jewelry heist.
I
And
love heist novels.
yes, it was so fun to write. But it's contemporary, so it's set in modern times, and it's about two best friends that are con artists, and that's what I'm going to say. And there's a heist involved, and it was so fun to write. I wrote it last year, and the first draft I wrote it in 3 months, and the whole thing was finished in like 7 months, I think, with edits and everything done.
Wow.
So it was like it was just like blah, blah, blah. It was just came out so quick, and I found it, like, compared to Marion Lane, where there was this whole world that I had to create, and all these gadgets and everything. I found it like a lot easier, really, to write. But yeah, so it's a lot of fun, but it's very different from Marion Lane. I felt like I needed a refresher, like I didn't want to do anything similar.
A palate cleanser of sorts.
Yeah, I felt like that, because it's, as I say, it was 3 books and 6 years of Marion being in my head, and all those characters and all those gadgets. And I felt like if I wrote anything in that genre, even, I would write like something so similar. Do you know what I mean? Like it would be like too similar, because it has to be Marion Lane, or it has to be something completely different. So for now, I'm just gonna. Both of my next 2 books are very, very different, but also a lot of fun.
Well,
I always try to keep things lighthearted and fun.
Yeah. Well, dear readers, if you're just coming to the Marion Lane series, you are in the enviable position to get to read all 3 in one go. The rest of us had to wait a year between each book, and all 3 are out now. Marion Lane and The Raven's Revenge is the brand new one. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode where you can go grab it. Tess, if folks are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you're up to, where's the best place for them to find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Tess_Amy_, and I'm on Instagram, T.A. Willberg, actually, on Instagram. And I have a website as well, tawillberg.com. And I try to, answer my messages and emails as best I can. I love hearing from readers. That's probably been the best thing that I've discovered, like the most unexpected thing, hearing from readers and how much they love the books.
Excellent. Well, we'll link all those up to make it easy for folks to find you. Tess, been so much fun catching up. Will you please come back next year and let's talk about your new project when it comes out?
I would love to. Thanks for having me again. It's always so great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tess.
Okay.
That's our episode for today. There's so much more to come as we talk with authors about the craft of writing, but also the business of publishing. Be sure to subscribe to the Storycraft Cafe podcast in your favorite podcast app to never miss an episode. The Storycraft Cafe is made possible by Dabble. Writing a book is challenging. Your writing tool shouldn't be. Dabble is an easy-to-use online writing tool packed with helpful features that allow beginning novelists and published authors to create amazing stories. Visit us at dabblewriter.com and start your free trial. Thanks for listening.